second until the numbers start counting down, which I'm still waiting for. There we go. So, hello, everybody. I am your host, Eric. This joke is getting a bit old Smith, and we're just going to jump right into my favorite horror with author, podcaster, Irreverent Witch, Lisa Quigley. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here and talk about some horror, talk about some favorite horror.
We can talk about anything. But the first question I have for you, I got this from your Amazon author page. What is an irreverent witch?
So that's a great question. I don't really know. I do know, but it's not like an official thing. People who've read my book, my first book, and maybe heard me talk before might know that I was raised very in like a very fundamentalist religious household that was in a lot of ways like very oppressive. And then when I got older and wasn't in that, I was always attracted to the paganism and witchcraft and things like that. But even in like all of my interests with that and with my interest in questions like why are we here, I like to season it with a little bit of irreverence and not take any of it too seriously. And I feel like that kind of helps add some levity and also keeps things from getting too dogmatic and lets me gives to me, the way I think of it is like gives me permission to evolve and shift and change and not be stuck in like one way of thinking. So that's kind of what it means to me.
Very nice. No, we should all avoid being stuck in one way of thinking.
Yeah.
Um,
Because and I'll just, sorry to cut you off, but like to me it's like even in any kind of when you're learning about like any kind of thought system or any kind of like philosophy, if you go too deep into it, I feel like it can get to that point where anything can become dogmatic. So to me it's like a little bit of a reverence, not taking it too seriously. I am a witch, whatever that means to me in the moment, but I also really love like the horror witch, and I love Sabrina, and I love all that stuff. Like it's not, I know there's certain people who will be like, oh, that's not like what real witches do, or some people have had problems with Sabrina because it makes it seem like witches are Satanists, and it's like that's not true. But it's like I just love it because it just keeps me from taking things too seriously, and like it's just fun. And I don't know. That's where the irreverence comes in.
that's great. That's fantastic. But now I have to ask, did you watch The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina?
I have not finished it. So I have watched the first season and I'm about halfway through the second season. So I haven't watched the whole thing. I think it's, not a perfect thing, but it's just fun. I enjoy it for how fun I think it is.
I haven't seen the show. I've read the comic book that it's based on, which I thought was fantastic. But I haven't seen the show, so I can't say how faithful it is, although I think it was brought to Netflix by the guy that wrote the book, the comic, I think.
I don't think I read the comic, and I didn't read that comic. I've read Archie comics, which the Sabrina universe is in the same universe as the Archie universe, and I watched I grew up as a teenager in the 90s, so I watched the original, like I'll say original show Sabrina, right. And so I'm not too familiar with the comic, and ever since I watched the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I'm like, oh, now I really have to read the comic and go back to it.
Well, I've been a comic book reader forever. I've got my Marvel Zombies quilt back here and some other comic book stuff that's a little bit in frame there. And I as a child, read regular Archie comics. But now, over the past, not sure, 10 years maybe, there's Afterlife with Archie, which is basically an Archie zombie story. And of course, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. There's Jughead the Hunger, where Jughead's a werewolf.
Whoa, I didn't realize that.
And Vampironica.
Oh.
And there's even a crossover that I don't have yet. That's Jughead the Hunger crossing over with Vampironica. Oh, and there's a great comic book writer, Cullen Bunn, did a mini series called Blossom 666 with the two. I don't know if you ever watched Riverdale. The two Blossom siblings, the twins, and one of the, I guess in the story, I haven't read it yet. I have it. One of them is the Antichrist, but no one knows which one. So this whole line of like Archie horror is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I wonder, it's so interesting to think how that might have happened, or like how that evolved out of the original Archie comics. It's so interesting. But I did watch Riverdale. I don't remember if I might have watched it all but the last season. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy like a lot of different things across the board. And sometimes I just really love that CW style over the top teenage drama. It's just so ridiculous, but it's just fun. And it got, I felt, a little bit dark. I don't think it did kind of, it went dark, but not like full blown horror dark, but I thought it was fun. It was a great show. It's entertaining.
Excuse me. I didn't even finish the first season. But that's not because I didn't enjoy it. What I saw I really liked, but I have so many books.
Yeah.
And it always comes down to frequent viewers of this of my YouTube channel will have heard this before, but 95% of the time, if it's a choice between watching something and reading, I'm going to read. So I just sort of fell out of watching Riverdale.
I hear you. I'm always behind. Always behind. I'm behind with reading, but I read more probably than I watch. I have 2 kids. I work a full-time job. I have a podcast. Like, a lot of times, unfortunately, what goes is, and it's like, I love watching this stuff, but I'm just always behind. So I end up watching it eventually. It just takes me a lot longer, especially now that we have 2 kids and, you know, we put them to bed, they go to bed, and I'm like, time to watch a show. We start watching something and I fall asleep, and I'm just like, this is going to take a really long time.
Right now, and probably for the past couple of years, there have been very few shows that I've really just like watched every week as they've come out. Mm-hmm. For those shows that still do that. Again, huge comic book fan, so the Marvel shows on Disney Plus, I always watch every week. The last one that I did was Reservation Dogs.
I've been hearing so many good things about that.
FX on Hulu, which I absolutely loved. There was a 1-season show on ABC, which I almost never watch network stuff, but ABC, called Stumptown, which was a mystery show or private detective kind of show that was based on a comic book by the comic book writer and author Greg Rucka, who I'm a huge fan of. And unfortunately, that show was a casualty of COVID. From what I read, I saw a bunch of articles about it. It got picked up for a second season. And then when COVID hit, the people making it basically said, well, we can't do it right now. And ABC was like, well, then, no, we're not going to pick up the show then.
I feel like that happened to quite a few shows.
But I loved that show. And that was one I watched every week. I'd get home from work, usually the day after it was on, because then I would watch it on demand. Chucky, the new Chucky on Sci-Fi, I want to watch, but I haven't seen it yet.
There's so much I might want to, like, I really want to watch Midnight Mass.
Yeah.
I think that would be right up my alley, and I think it's only a mini series, which I really like.
Yeah.
I actually used to want things to go on, and now I just really like it's almost like you get to enjoy a longer movie and you get to watch it over the space of a couple weeks and then it's done and then you've watched it. And so I really enjoy the miniseries because it's like a little longer than a movie, like 8 or 10 episodes, but it's not a full show that goes on for like 5 or 6 seasons, which I used to love, but now it's like just don't have time.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd love to watch Midnight Mass. I keep hearing, of course, everyone's talking about Squid Games.
I know. Yeah.
I'd like to check that out. But again, I just, like, especially right now, and I don't actually know if any people that watch my videos care, but I've been trying to pump out, like, Halloween books to read and review. So it's definitely been no TV, just reading and pretty much every book I've read so far this month has taken place at Halloween.
That's so fun. There's so many good ones.
And actually, 2 of them, I read 2 in a row that took place Halloween 1987.
Wow.
Which was just a coincidence. One was, well, hold on. I'm going to take a drink in the middle of my thought. One was a Rewind or Die book, speaking of.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Haley? No, it was Haley Piper's.
Haley Piper's.
Cannibal King.
That book is so good.
And then immediately after that, I read Brian Smith's new one, Racing with the Devil, which same year, Halloween 1987.
Wow. So interesting.
Well, let's talk about your debut novella and number 8 in the Rewind or Die series from Unnerving. Now, currently, I'm buying all of the Rewind or Die books. I have a list of everything, and anytime I order something from Amazon, I add the next Rewind or Die book on the list. But yours, I picked up last year, and read last year, I think, or very early this year, because I heard you on Ghoulish with Max Booth. And so, you sounded interesting. The book sounded interesting. So it was the second of the Rewind or Die. Survivor. Oh, what is it? Soul Survivors? The Killer Drop Bears one was the first one I picked up. And again, because of listening to Ghoulish. And then I picked up this one. I just actually got the 15th one today. So it'll be a little while before I get to Camp Neverland.
But I love the series because, I mean, and I'm biased because I'm in it, but other than being my 2 books, like they're not connected in any way, but they're quick because novellas, they're fun. So for me, I felt like the books from my, the other people who were putting them out were some of the only things I could read during like the really intense part of the pandemic. Not that it's not still really intense, but like when we had no clue what was going on, we were in lockdown the first time, my brain was like so fuzzy and all I could read was these Rewind or Die books because they were just so far removed from real life, and it felt like, watching a B horror movie, only I was reading it, but yeah, they're just a lot of fun. I think the series is so fun.
Well, it's even the ones that take place in modern day still feel like 80s horror, which I love. And I love the covers, the whole aesthetic. But I'm wondering, how did this come about as far as you hooking up with Unnerving? And was there an open call?
So let's see, where's my timeline? I think it was June of when did the book come out? May 2020. Yes, May 2020. So June of 2019, or somewhere around there. Is it May 2020? I think.
It just says 2020.
Yeah, it was. I think it was May, the end of May in 2020. So June of 2019 or so, or maybe like a little bit before that, Eddie Generous from Unnerving put out a call for. So what he did was a little bit different. So most of the time you'll see like a call for submissions for books or whatever. So he puts out this call that said he wanted to start the series called Rewind or Die, and he wanted at least 30% of the authors to be women. So he was accepting pitches from women for, I think he opened it for like a 1 or 2 month period, and then after the pitches, he then opened it up to like just regular submissions. But he was only taking pitches for that period of time and only from women, which really pissed a lot of people off. Which is kind of funny. But so what was funny is I had this idea. I was kind of thinking about starting it, and I saw this call for the for pitches, and I spent like an hour or so like thinking about, okay, I want to like pitch this idea. I typed it up. I like stressed about it being perfect, whatever. I sent the pitch over to Eddie, and then like an hour later he said, I really like the concept. Send me the manuscript when it's done. And I was like, okay, was that like, what does that mean? Of course, he still had to, that wasn't like, if I sent him a submission and it was like terrible, he wasn't going to take it, but he was already receptive to the idea. So I was like, all right, I just have to write something good. Or, who knows if it's good, but I was like, I have to, I just can't send him a bunch of drivel. So I spent the summer, I think I wrote it. Yeah, I spent the rest of the summer writing it, and then I think I finally finished with writing it, revising it, and then I submitted it like the end of October. And like a few days later, Eddie responded, and he was like, I like it. He's like, I dig it. I want to publish it. And I was like, what just happened? This is wild. So that's how it kind of happened in that sense.
Okay. Now, do you have any say in the cover design?
Sort of. So if he sent me the cover and I was like, it's terrible, I don't like it, I think he would work with me, but I didn't give him any input. He just sent me the cover one day. We were kind of like I was working on revisions. We were getting ready to like do all that. And he sends me, he's like, oh, by the way, here's the cover that I came up with. Let me know what you think. I really did. He said, he's like, I really dig it, but, and I'd like to run with it, but let me know if you don't like it or whatever. And I was like, this is awesome. And I loved it. So luckily.
Well, I really enjoyed the book. And as I was a teenager in the 80s and in the early 80s, I was there for the satanic panic boom. So I always dig anything that has to deal with that. This does say on the back that it's 1991. So it's a little bit later, but I really dug it, and I liked the twist. I don't know. Is it spoilery to say there's a twist?
I don't think it's spoilery if we don't. It's so hard to say. I don't think it's spoilery. There is a twist. Maybe also like if you're talking about what I think you're talking about, I think it's kind of like maybe like a subversion of a trope.
Sure. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes. I loved it. I thought that was fantastic.
That also pissed a lot of people off.
We will be spoiling the main book we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But I don't want to spoil this,
Sure.
and I think people should pick it up and read it. But yeah. That subversion of a trope is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. And
thank you.
I don't care about those people that were pissed off.
I really don't. To me, I'm like, it just wasn't for you then. So I thought it was really fun. Well, if you know my background, let me see if I can say this without spoiling. I just wanted to write a book where if these teenagers accidentally summoned the devil, that wasn't the worst thing that happened that day. That was like I was like, what? Because I was like, I can't do that because that's just too expected. So I wanted, it was like, what would be worse than that? And that was kind of like my thought process.
Like, I'm trying to, like I said, I heard your I heard you on Ghoulish with Max Booth, so I'm trying to like avoid going over the same stuff that you guys talked about. And if anybody wants to hear that stuff, go check out Ghoulish, find the episode with Lisa and listen, give it a listen.
I think it's just called like Devils with Lisa Quigley, or The Devil.
Something, yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, he's got great. He just gives you the subject matter. Here it is. This is who I'm talking to. So now Camp Neverland, was that another pitch by you? Did Eddie ask you for something else?
So he opened it up again. That he just put out a call and was like, I'm continuing the Rewind or Die series into 2021. I think it did pretty well for him. It was like, and I forget how many there are now, but
here's my little notebook where I have them written down, and I have 31 listed on here. And there may be new ones that I haven't even written down yet. But
there might be more beyond that. I don't know if he's continuing it further. I haven't heard anything about that, but I think they're doing well and they're fun and I think they're a little bit different from novella. Like in terms of like, it's kind of like filling its own little niche, I think. So I like that. But no, he put out a call that he was continuing it, and I was like, oh, and he put on the call that he wanted you to send the full manuscript unless you had written for him before or if you had other books published elsewhere. So you had like some...
Right.
So if you hadn't published with him or anyone before, he wanted to see the whole thing. If you had published with him, he would take a pitch, or if you had published other books, he would take a pitch. So I really didn't think I had anything. I had no ideas. The 2020, as you know, was just a shit stain of a year, to put it mildly. And I was having trouble like writing. I was having like just all that stuff, and I just saw the call, and I was like, I don't think I have anything. And then it was just like a couple days before the call was going to close, and I woke up one morning and I was like, I have an idea. And I was like, let me just see if Eddie's interested. So I put together this pitch, and as I was putting together the pitch, I had more ideas of like what it would be. And I just was like, let me see what he thinks. And I sent him the pitch, and he responded and was like, yeah, write it and send it to me. And I was like, okay. So I wrote it and I sent it to him in January. And like 2 days later, he's like, here's the contract.
Nice.
I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, sweet. So that one moved a lot faster, I think, because he was already he accepted it in January. Then he wanted it to come out in June because it's a summer camp book. It's, I kind of called it like Sleepaway Camp meets Carrie. So then we had to just move. I had to like edit really quickly, and it was like a kind of, compared to the first one, which I felt like I had so much time leading up to, and I had all that time. It was just like, boom, November, I got the idea, wrote the book, sent it to him in January. So it took me from like November to January to finish it, send it to him. He sends me the thing, and then in June it came out. So from the time I started it to June, it was like not even a full year. So I was like, what just happened? That was such a whirlwind. And it was so unexpected because I hadn't had any ideas. So I thought, oh, it's going to be like years before I write something else. And then boom, had this idea, and
great.
I thought it was kind of fun. Yeah. And it was perfect for Rewind or Die because it was that summer camp, teenage, like murder slasher kind of feel, you know? So I was like, this isn't really something I think would work anywhere but Rewind or Die because it was too B horror feeling.
I love B horror
too.
All right, so your new one, which just came out, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, October
4th.
5th. Yes.
We're gonna wait and talk about this towards the end.
Okay.
And I do have some questions about your podcast that we'll get to at the end. So before we get into our main subject here, one of my regular viewers and commenters on YouTube had some questions, general questions on the episode of this show that aired last week. She commented and just had some writing questions. So I was like, hey, I'm doing an interview today. I'll ask Lisa. So these are just general questions that hopefully you can answer.
Okay.
About writing. So her first question was, what got you into writing?
It's hard to say because I don't really remember a time when I wasn't. Or at least like when I wasn't interested in it. I wrote my first attempts at a story at 6. I just, as long as I can remember, loved books. Was fascinated by books. I would like pretend to read when adults. I would like pick up novels and like sit there and like look and be like, do the adults think I'm reading? I was just like always into reading, always into books. And it's one of those things where it's like I don't really know where that came from, or it wasn't my parents bought me books, but they weren't big readers. Nobody I was around was a big reader. From the minute I saw books, it was just a magnet, And then I don't know what it's like either to read a book and not want to try to do that. That's the other piece of it. So it's like I just, for as long as I remember, picked up a book and was like, I want to try this. I want to write stories. This seems, I don't know. So the answer is, I guess, I just always have been.
It sounds like the kind of thing you hear from actors. They'll say, they saw their first movie or they saw their first play, and immediately, even as a child, they're like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, it just, and I know some people come to it later in life, but for me, it was just, I used to think like, oh, it's this is a sign, which it kind of is, like a sign that this is what, because I've just always loved it. But when I grew up and met other writers and discovered like, oh, most other writers were the exact same way, it's not really a special story. It's like, oh, when you pretty much ask any writer, other than people who came to it a little bit later in life for whatever reason, I would say on my podcast, like 80%, 90% even of the people who we ask like about the first thing they wrote and how old they were, they say they were 6. It's like this age that every writer, not every, but a lot, tries to write their first thing. So I don't know. I just always wanted to do it.
Hey. And I don't think I mentioned these questions are from DK Dempsey. Shout out to DK. So the next thing she asked was, do you see writing as a job, a career, or a hobby?
None of the above.
Okay.
I don't, so that's difficult. I don't see it as a hobby because I feel like hobby implies it's something you do like just for fun, or because I do like writing for fun. But I have a day job that I, also really like. And I'm at this place where I have like a few published books. I do make money from it, but I kind of, for me personally, and I know a lot of writers don't feel this way, I don't want it to be my main source of income, because for me, I feel that would put too much pressure on it and take away some of the fun of it. But that being said, it still doesn't quite feel like a hobby either, because it's not, it's more serious than a hobby, but it's not really like So I guess maybe career of all those three things. I do have a writing career, but it's not my main breadwinner or whatever.
I get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Next was, do you write for the publisher, for readers, or for yourself?
For myself.
Okay. I kind of figured that's going to be the answer if I asked anybody.
Like, it's cool when what I write for myself resonates with readers. Like, that's awesome. It's really depressing when it doesn't. But I think if you're not writing for yourself, there's no, there would be no fun in that. If I was just trying to write to like make readers happy or make publishers happy, I gotta enjoy what I'm writing, and it has to be something I want to say. Otherwise, like, that's a lot of hours of my life to waste on something that's not for me. So.
Well, and you mentioned, if it were a job, the kind of pressure, and I always think about, actually, the one that comes to mind the most is Dan Brown, because I always imagine after what happened with the Da Vinci Code, the pressure on him for his next book had to be unbelievable.
Well, look at George R.R. Martin.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
The pressure is so unbelievable, he can't do it. And I'm not even like denigrating him by saying that. I think he had this story that was his and it was whatever. I think it got much bigger than him. This is me speculating. This is my opinion. This is not like, I have no educated reason for saying this. That's just like what I sense from the whole situation. I think it just got bigger than him. There's fans, there's people demanding that he write it. There's people say, and I think he just can't do it. I think it's too much.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Completely understandable. Okay, and then the last thing was, do you have one hint or tip for new writers?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say to new writers is to, write for yourself first. Those stories that you feel like you have to tell those. And as much as possible, just try to be with the story that you're telling and try not to worry about, is this going to get published? Who's going to want to read? Like, that's for later. I would say focus on like telling the truth that you have to tell. What stories do you want to think about? And trust your instincts. And that, I think, is going to get you who knows where. But I think if you want it to be enjoyable and any kind of fun, trust your instincts, write what you want to write, and have fun.
Well, one of the things I know a number of writers have said along these lines is either, I can't remember who it was just recently, said something like they were reading a book and it didn't go the way they expected. And so they decided, well, I'll just write the story the way I would have written it. And then the other thing is authors that, they read all these books and sort of, well, no one's writing the story that I really want to read, so I'll just have to write it for myself.
Exactly. Yep. And then let it be. And I think that goes back to like with Hell's Bells, it's kind of a ridiculous story. It's got all these things that are disconnected that are not, these things that don't seem like they go together, but they're all things I'm obsessed with. And I was just like, I'm just going to write a story that's going to be fun for me, that says what I wanted to say, that combines all these things that I'm personally fascinated by thinking about. And what do you know? Like, that's the first book that finally gets published after kind of trying to write like, well, what's popular right now, or what do people seem like they like? It's like, well, what do I like? And I think that's a good place to start. What are the things that are so interesting to you that maybe don't seem like they fit together, and make a story out of it and have fun. And you got to spend the hours doing it without any guarantee of anything. Right. So may as well enjoy it, and may as well write about something you're interested in.
Well, good advice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm going to pull this book over here because we're going to get to our main event. So, your choice to talk about for your favorite horror is the Grady Hendrix novel, My Best Friend's Exorcism. I love this cover.
I do too. I love both the covers, but
love the whole thing. So first, can you give us, for anyone who's not familiar with this book, just a quick synopsis?
A quick synopsis is that Abby's best friend, Gretchen, starts acting weird. And at first, Abby kind of thinks like, oh, it's just weird high school stuff. And then she starts to suspect that maybe something more sinister is happening. And she begins to suspect that Gretchen is possessed. And then she has to figure out how to get her unpossessed.
Okay. See, and I always forget to say this at the very beginning of this part of the discussion, but people, if there may be spoilers, if you don't want the book spoiled and you haven't read it yet, just pause the video, go read it real quick, and then come back. But we're going to get into the book. We're going to get into it. But before we really dive deep in, can you quickly say why this was your choice for this conversation?
Well, I love this book. I've read it, I think, maybe 3 times now. I consider it to be like one of my desert island books. Like if you can take 5 books to a desert island. But I think what I really love about it, aside from the nostalgia, the 80s nostalgia, aside from the music and all of that, and just how awesome it is, I think it goes back to that idea of subverting tropes and doing something. I think this book does something with exorcisms that I had not seen before. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, something just popped into my head.
And it made me just be like, wow, I'm like really surprised by this. Because I feel like when you read a book about an exorcism or you watch a movie about an exorcism, you can kind of guess the formula of what's going to happen. And so I was enjoying this book. I'm reading it and I'm like, and then they're, not to get too far ahead, but they do end up calling a priest in, or sort of. And I'm like,
that's what popped in my head.
Yeah. It's like, but that isn't, then it does not, it's like he goes farther than that. And I feel like it was so refreshing and surprising. And I was like, this is the first time in years that I've been surprised by a book about an exorcism or a story about an exorcism. And so it just has a really special place in my heart. I love this book so much.
All right. Now we're going to start digging in. And we can break down the story. We can do whatever. This is all Thunderdome here. So now for me, I had read Paperbacks from Hell and really loved that. And again, growing up in that time period, that was my jam, as the kids say. Those old 70s and 80s horror paperbacks. So I started buying Grady Hendrix's books. I have Horror Store. Obviously, I have this one. And then we sold our souls, the vampire one, whose name I can never remember the words in the right order. Final Girl Support Group. But I had all of those before I read any of them. And then
as we do.
So now I can't remember if it was last year or even this year that I finally read this one. Finally jumped in. And yeah, it's great. It's well, the blurb on the cover is great. If The Exorcist had been authored by Tina Fey, because it absolutely has that Mean Girls quality to it.
Yeah.
Um,
it's like a John.
John
It's late.
Hughes.
It's like a John Hughes movie, but with an Exorcist twist. And I love that. I mean, just before you even, I mean, all the chapter titles are named after, like the first chapter title is "Don't You Forget About Me," which right there you're like Breakfast Club, and it's got that feel of an 80s teen movie, but then it's really dark. And it goes pretty dark.
Yes.
Even the part where they're having their little sleepover, and I think the part I got like goosebumps, like my spine actually tingled, was when Gretchen is missing behind the lake or something, and she's in that weird outhouse thing.
Yeah, the little cabin shack
thing.
Yeah.
And they talk, and they hear a man's voice come out of it, but they took acid or something, but it's not really kicking in.
Right.
And so you're kind of not sure, was that a hallucination or?
Yeah, didn't they got something from someone, some drugs from someone, and they all took it, and none of them, they were all like, no, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
Right?
So suppose it's like they thought they took acid, but you're never really sure because nothing really happens. But Gretchen disappears. She walks out. She goes into that little cabin thing, and then Abby goes to try to find her, and she hears a man's voice. So I like that there's this little doubt because they did take something.
Right.
And it's possible it just kicked in really late. And you're like, okay, was that a hallucination, or was a man's voice like talks to her from outside of that outhouse? And that part it was like a horror movie chill. Like I got that chill. So I love that it's like combines that feel of an 80s movie, 80s teen movie especially, and then you've got demons.
Yeah, I love that all the chapter titles are 80s song titles. And then we meet our characters, and again, it's been a little while since I've read it. They're going to a very prestigious school, and is Abby the non-rich one?
Abby's the new one, yeah, and she's not rich, but I think her parents like pulled some stuff or sold a bunch of things. Somehow they're sending her kind of like to a school a little outside of their means.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But it absolutely has a bit of a Mean Girls feel to it. And then they go to the lake house, and this weird thing happens. And one of the things I like also is the ambiguity throughout a huge chunk of the book. Because as the weird things start happening and the bad things start happening, there's always a possibility that it's just a girl being mean to her friends. For a long time, it's unclear. It could go either way. And I really like that.
For a while, even to the point where you're like, is she? Or is she just being nasty? Because she just starts being nasty. But it's not the kind of nasty that seems like a full-on demon. It's just kind of like mean tricks, or like, well, that's probably a little bit farther forward, but the diet shake thing is
right. I was going to say, up to a point, everything could easily be explained without bringing anything supernatural into it. There is a tipping point.
Yeah.
But before that, everything with the diet shakes, the notes between the teacher and the other girl, and everything that's going on there could all be easily explained by mundane, just really mean girl stuff.
Right.
But then eventually you do get to that tipping point.
Yeah, and you're like, well.
You're like, okay. Excuse me. And then the thing that I had a reaction to was I had forgotten about the would be evangelical group, the family traveling evangelical muscle men.
Yes.
Thing.
What's so wild about that is I grew up with things like this happening. I went to these churches where there would be these weird shows, or you'd have like this family come to your church and they were like a traveling like entertainment, or they would come and do skits, or this kind of thing really happens, and it reads very bizarre because you're like, what is this? But I'm like, this is real. And how the guy that Abby kind of like tries to get to, doesn't he? So something happens where he okay, I'm gonna back up a minute.
Sure.
I feel like one of the moments when you do start to feel like things are eerie, but you're still not sure, is the moment when, remember with all the owls?
Right.
I think it's is it outside of Abby's house or outside of Gretchen's house? I can't remember, but there's just like all these owls.
Yeah, I don't remember which house it was.
But it feels like it might have been it's been a minute since I have read it a few times, but it's been a minute. So I feel like it was Gretchen's because it was like they were attracted to her for some reason. And if you kind of like do a little bit of research, it's like there is a demon kind of like associated with owls, and like, so that was a very weird thing that happened. But it could have just been a bunch of owls, but like weird things start happening kind of on the periphery of the mean girl stuff. And I feel like that was one of them where you're like, what was that? That's so strange. And then I think what kind of convinces Abby that something real is going on is this traveling family muscle builder. Like, they come to do this performance at one of their school assemblies, and he points at Gretchen and he says something about like there's an owl inside of her, or he says something like that. And Abby's like, she's like, okay. And I think that's the moment when Abby believes, I don't know what the heck else is wrong with my best friend, but that is too weird that he saw that. And then she enlists him to do an exorcism.
Right. I'm going to jump out of the book for a second, because the owl talk in Reservation Dogs. So owls are a big thing in a lot of Native American beliefs, mythologies, whatever. I'm not an expert. But there's an episode of Reservation Dogs where the four main characters, teens, are going to see this old uncle. And there's I don't remember I couldn't tell if it was a wooden owl or a stuffed owl, but he's got one in a tree, and the characters turn their eyes away because of their beliefs. But the thing that I thought was really cool was they actually pixelated the owl's eyes in the show.
Oh, wow.
Because you don't want to look an owl in the eyes.
That is so cool.
That was great. But back to this. Yeah. I loved the muscle guys. And once she recruits one of them. Is he the youngest of the brothers? I can't remember.
I feel like We're such experts talking about this book. But I feel like he's like the youngest and kind of trying to prove himself. Like he doesn't feel like they take him seriously in the family. He's not the one they kind of look to for, he's not the leader. He's not. And so I think he's kind of having a complex and like wants to do something important and like prove his connection to God and prove his like leadership.
Right.
He's kind of got that feel.
I'll say the one advantage to us not remembering everything is maybe it'll push someone to just read the book to figure out what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah. Like, just read the book if you're confused.
And then again, I'm going to ask, doesn't he at one point run away?
Yeah. So, yeah, this is the part of the book where I was just like, what is happening? Because Gretchen is like, they have her, I don't know what they got. Oh, I think they went to some, like one of their parents, like beach houses or something. And they've got Gretchen like tied to the bed and they're doing all this stuff. He's like rubbing salt in her face and, her eyes are all red. He's like, it's going to make the demon come out. He's like, this is what we've got to do. We've got to have faith. And he's getting like very aggressive in his measures. And then I think that's when I think Gretchen starts talking in a different voice and that stuff starts happening. And when he says, he either says they're going to boil water to pour down her throat, right? Mm-hmm. Or is he going to get like some sort of acid to pour down her throat? Something, boil water, right? Or something.
Or bleach.
He wants to do something where he's going to pour like
something horrible you don't want to pour down someone's throat.
Yeah, it's irreversible. Like if he does this, he will probably kill her. And that's the part where Abby's like, I want to get the demon out. I don't want to kill my friend.
Right.
And that tension was so intense because I'm just like imagining this young teenage girl with this like kind of yoked like bodybuilder dude, like thinking he's like high on Jesus, like gonna save this girl by pouring bleach down her throat or boiling water, whatever it was. And that moment to me, I was like, that is even more terrifying than the demon, because can you imagine if he did it? I was like, that's just, he would kill her.
He's not some church sanctioned exorcist.
He's just making stuff up. He's
things
that
he's doing seem crazy.
Yeah. He's just, I think, just trying to be like the power of the Holy Spirit, like, and just literally making things up.
Now, to go back a little bit, and unfortunately, I may have this confused with a different book. A great book, but isn't there a point where Gretchen sort of becomes the queen bee and Abby gets pushed out of the friend circle?
I think that there's a group of 4 of them. So Abby and Gretchen are best friends.
Mm-hmm.
But there's 2 other girls in the group.
Right.
And it seems like Gretchen is like doing these things to kind of play at all of them. Abby has like bad acne, and so she's playing on that. I think there is a point where the Gretchen kind of does sour the other girls against her.
Mm-hmm.
Or she's like telling the other girls stuff. So Abby kind of feels isolated from the group.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember all the details of that, but there is, which goes back to what you were saying, is there is this weird interplay where it could just be like teenage high school girls being really mean,
Right.
And that's part of it, is like there's this like backstabbing and gossiping, and they're all talking about each other, and Gretchen's like spreading rumors, and I think, doesn't she give Abby something for her face that makes it worse, like on purpose, like her acne? Maybe I'm making that up. Did I just make that up?
I don't know. It sounds familiar.
I feel like she like gives her a cream because she's got her thing is she has bad or she wears like a ton of makeup. So she does something with that. Yeah. She does something that makes her break out more or have a reaction.
Yeah, and so even the makeup isn't helping. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that I do recall that now that you mention it. But I can picture them on I would call it the quad, the lawn, whatever of and I just have this image of Gretchen and the other two, and one or two of them or one of them at least has a boyfriend.
Yeah.
I believe the one that ends up drinking the powders.
Yeah.
The diet powders. Yeah. And them just sort of, earlier in the book, we had their dynamic, them hanging out, doing their things. And now Gretchen's being pushed away. They're all just treating her horribly because, or Abby.
Yeah.
Because You're of right. Gretchen, they're pushing her away. And I can see her sitting alone.
Yes.
They're out on the lawn doing their thing and she's alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I know exactly what scene you're talking about, and it's definitely sitting on the lawn, and Abby kind of ends up like on the outskirts of it. Yeah.
So the one friend, we can't remember the other two girls' names.
Okay. One is Margaret. Is one Glee? Wait. One is Margaret.
I'm looking at the back, and it only has Abby and Gretchen mentioned on the back of it. There's a Margaret, and there's a Glee. There we go.
I think it's Margaret and Glee. Yeah.
Apparently open to the right page that has both their names. Now I don't remember which is which. One of them, Gretchen starts giving her this German diet powder. I think she says it's from Germany or something like that.
It is like a shake. So it's supposed to be like a diet shake. Because she's, this is the era of diet, every trick to diet. You got to be skinny. You got to be, all this, ridiculousness.
Heroin chic.
Yeah. And something is happening. I think it's Margaret is the one she gives the powder to. And she's trying to lose weight for something. And also Gretchen's like in her ear, like telling her she's fat. She needs to there's all this stuff. And so she starts giving her this powder and saying and she starts losing weight and getting really skinny, but then she disappears, right? Like she stops coming to school. Mm-hmm. And Abby goes to see her and she's like in her room and Abby's like, she's pregnant because her belly is swollen.
Right. She's like super skin and bones except for that, right?
And she's like, what? So how did she get pregnant so fast on all this stuff? And then it turns out that it's a freaking tapeworm. And that and I think this is a real thing. Like, I don't know the details of it, but I really think there was a period where women were actually or people were actually ingesting tapeworms so that they would lose weight.
I remember, I don't know if it's like an apocryphal thing or if it's real or if it's an urban legend, but I do remember diet pills that were a tapeworm.
Yeah, I feel like that was either talked about or it could have been an urban legend. It could have been something that some people tried in really extreme measures, but basically this tapeworm in Margaret is so big that her belly is swollen. And I think this is the part that feel of, even with the exorcism, this scene to me is the most horror of the whole thing. It's so grotesque and disturbing because so I think what happens is Abby brings Margaret some strawberry ice cream and it attracts the tapeworm out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then she just basically is pulling this tapeworm that's 30 feet long out of her mouth. It's so crazy. I was like, what am I reading? It's so gross.
And then the other friend, Glee, there's a thing with a teacher. May or may not have been an affair with a teacher. And then, of course, it turns out that Gretchen was behind all. Gretchen was sending notes
from pretending they were from the teacher, right?
From the teacher to her,
and
to Glee, so Glee thinks the teacher's in love with her.
Mm-hmm. And then I think then Glee does like throw herself at the teacher, and the teacher's like, whoa, what's happening? Right. But then I think it gets him in trouble. It gets like, it creates this whole, so basically it seems like this demon, which that's the other thing I really like about it, is like the demon in Gretchen is in a lot of ways a metaphor for like the real demons with a little d, you know, that we right. have in our culture, in our society, like these things that happen, these things we do, and it almost is like this demon is really just this agent of chaos and disconnection and separation from each other, and it stops you from, you know, in the case of something like Margaret, it stops her from loving herself, insecurities, like it's a real demon, but we have those demons in real right. life, you know. But I think he kind of just shows that with the demon as this conduit for real things that happen and things we do to each other and ourselves.
Right. Well, that's where I think the ambiguity comes in, because again, for the longest time, it could simply be that.
Exactly.
The lowercase d demon.
Yeah. Just turns out to be a real one who is making all that stuff happen. But yeah.
Now let's see if you remember this better than I do. Because this all goes down after they take these what may or may not be drugs. Gretchen disappears. There's the whole shack in the woods. Now, doesn't Abby go back to the shack at one point? Isn't there? Doesn't she learn something about it? I can't remember. Again, see, people, you need to read the book yourself. The book.
I feel like she goes back, and I don't think anything happens. Because I feel like she goes, and I could be misremembering, but I feel like she goes back and she's like, the answer is going to be at the shack. And it's just, she opens it, it's really creepy, and then it's just nothing. It's just paint buckets or something.
Okay.
But I could be misremembering.
Unfortunately, I didn't have time to reread it.
I know, I didn't either. I'm just...
Or I would have. Because it's definitely worth rereading. Well, obviously, you've read it multiple times.
I should remember it better since I have read it multiple times. But I do think she goes back. I'm fuzzy on what she learns there. But your viewers can...
Exactly. We're enticing people to read.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So now, and again, at one point, doesn't the muscle guy leave Abby with Gretchen? Doesn't he take off for something?
So, yeah, I think it, first of all, like, gets too real for him.
Mm-hmm.
Abby manages to stop him from pouring the boiling whatever down Gretchen's throat. And I think he's like, has this moment where he kind of snaps to, and the reality of the fact that he's had a young girl tied up in a bed for hours, and he's like putting salt in her face and doing all, like, basically torturing her, which even though you do believe as a reader at this point that she's possessed, you're still a little not sure at that moment,
right?
And you're
like, a little bit of doubt.
Yeah, and you're like, was he just torturing? Are they just torturing this girl who just needs help? Like, and he leaves and he's like, I'm gonna go get my dad. I think that's what he said. I think he's gonna go get his like the dad or his older brothers or something. He's like, I'm gonna go, and she's like, okay, and he just leaves, but he doesn't come back.
Doesn't he tell her? I don't remember if he says just don't talk to her at all.
He says.
Again, man, so many books start to run together in my head because I feel like there's the whole thing with learning the demon's real name.
You might be right. I'm trying to find the spot.
But he says don't talk to the demon.
Yeah, I think he does tell her that. I think he does tell her, like, don't talk to the demon. And then he just but he goes. But he gets scared. He gets scared. He gets scared. Off. And he takes off. And he's... Oh, yeah, here. Here's a part where she says, she asks him, promise she won't get hurt. And he goes, that's up to her. And he goes, an exorcism is a contest of wills between the demon and the exorcist. And he goes, as Jesus Christ once said, by any means necessary. But he's like, yeah.
He's got the muscles of the Lord.
The muscles of the Lord. That's other. Oh, yeah, there's a part where, okay, first you have to burn. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So he's like, yeah. He wants her to fill the tub. He's going to pour stuff in her throat. He's like, you know, and Abby goes, what good is an exorcism if he's dead? I'm just trying to find it because now I'm curious.
Even,
yeah.
I like his character. It's just, he's a quirky, just an odd character, well written.
He's so well written.
And I can just picture their act when the whole family comes to the thing and they're, you know, again, muscles for the Lord.
So they do find out the demon's name, and the demon is Andrus. Yeah. And there's a certain point where they stop calling, like, they stop referring to her as Gretchen. They start calling her, he starts writing her as Andrus. Andrus is the one talking.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just wondering, like, what happened with what's his name? With the brother, his name is Brother Lemon.
Yes.
Brother Lemon. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So here he goes, I gotta go. He's like, I'm gonna go. He goes, I'm in over my head. My daddy will know what to do. He deals with worse demons than this all the time. He'll fix it. He'll make it right. And then he's like, I gotta go back and get my daddy. That's all he says. And he just like takes off. But they do get the demon's name, and the demon's name is Andrus. And it's really after, it's after he leaves that the demon gets more, where you realize, like, oh, yeah, this is a real demon.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I don't remember how Abby saves her friend.
That's the best part. And I do remember that. That's the part that, like...
I have a feeling... I have an inkling, but I'm not sure. So, if you could refresh my memory.
Yes. So, if we kind of, like, backtrack just a little throughout the book, like, so Abby and Gretchen, we kind of didn't really talk about this, but they meet when they're, like, 8 or 9 at a roller skating party, and they become instant best friends. Yeah.
That's right.
They're, like, best friends. They, like, all the things of, like, that when you meet someone when you're, like, 8 or 9 years old, there's no dramas of high school yet. Your love is pure. You just love each other. You want to hang out all the time. They had crushes on boys. They're there's a boy they had a crush on named Tommy Cox, and there's that member of the Coke can that Tommy touched,
Right.
and they saved it forever. And their music, they've got You've Got the Beat, you've got, you know, all these songs, and that's the heartbeat of their friendship, is like what that bond they created when they were 8 or 9. So fast forward back to here, Abby, the guy leaves, Brother Lemon leaves, Abby tries to keep reading off of this exorcism printout or booklet or something. She's like trying to say these words of like, Jesus Christ asked you to leave. Like, she's saying all this stuff, and it's just empty. It doesn't mean anything. It's not working. The demon is laughing at her. The more she goes on, the more mocking the demon gets. And there's a part where you really think like she's defeated. Like, Abby's kind of hallucinating a little bit. The room looks like, I think there's like a part where it looks like snakes or bugs are coming, not snakes, but like bugs or something are coming off of her. Weird stuff starts happening.
Right.
And then there's a part Abby's like laying on the floor with Gretchen. They kind of go through this whole thing. Brother Lemon's not coming back. The demon is like too powerful. Abby's like kind of like passed out on the floor next to Gretchen, and she starts to hear the You've Got the Beat in her mind. And she starts singing it. And then I think maybe even Gretchen starts responding a little bit like to the beat. And then the beat gets stronger. But then instead of reading off of this exorcism sheet that means nothing to Abby, she just starts casting out the demon by the power of their friendship, by the power of the Coke can from Tommy Cox, by the power of their roller skates. Like, and that is and this is like massive spoiler for anybody. I'm getting chills talking about it, but that's the part where I'm like, that is the only thing strong enough to get rid of the demon, is like their love for each other, their friendship, not some paper with some words on it that Abby doesn't even know if they're true or not. It's the only thing she knows that are true that has the power to get the demon out. It's the best. It's like the best.
Well, Huey Lewis in the News, it's the power of love.
Yeah. And that's the part where I'm like, this is amazing, because you really think it's just going to follow the formula of every exorcism, everything you've ever seen. And when it's the power of, you know, their friendship and everything they've been through together, and that's the only thing strong enough to bring Gretchen back. It's just so good.
I forgot about the roller rink. Now, was Abby wearing some weird t-shirt?
I think so. I think she was like really into E.T. Somebody was
right.
Yeah, and like I think.
And now, I think it was
Abby's birthday party. And she invited everyone from school, and then one of the other girls from school, which I think is like either Margaret or Glee, decided to throw a party that same day.
Right.
So
that's
all
what
the
I was
other kids, it was like a pool party. So all the other kids went to the pool party, and Gretchen's mom made her come. She didn't want to. But then they were like,
gift?
I think so. She gave her like what was it? You're right. It was like
it was kind of like my parents made me.
It was a Bible. What? It was like one of those Precious Moments Bibles that had the like engraving on it, you know?
Yeah. That's right.
And then she's like, sorry, my mom. So Gretchen's family was like that. But then, and Gretchen didn't even want to come, but then they ended up having like a party of 2, and that's when they became best friends. So that's kind of like what kicked. We got to do the conversation over. No, I'm just kidding. You forget about that part, because it does kind of start there, and then it fast forwards to high school where everything's starting to get a lot more complicated.
Right. Yeah, I forgot all about that part. But I couldn't remember. I was going to ask, but you got to it on your own. I couldn't remember if it was that roller rink birthday party where someone else invited everybody, or if it was after that when she and Gretchen were already friends, where she had another party planned and someone else.
It was that party
that
because
one.
it was Abby's party when she was so excited. She gave everyone invitations. And then I think it was Margaret was either like she was like had a pool party. She's like,
Right.
"Oh, I'm having a pool party," and she planned it after on purpose to conflict,
Right.
and so all the kids went to like the rich kid party. Nobody wanted to come to the roller rink except Gretchen came. Yeah,
the weird ET wasn't the party itself like ET
themed? Yeah, because she's like, I saw ET and I forget the way she describes it, but I was like, I felt like that when I saw E.T. too. It just like made her. Oh yeah, she went back to see it again. Oh yeah, she says. She saw. She goes. Abby Rivers was a certified grown-up because she'd finally cried at a movie. It was E.T. the extraterrestrial, and she went back to see it again and again, fascinated by her own involuntary reaction. Helpless in the grip of the tears that washed down her face as E.T. and Elliot reached for each other. And I was like, that's such a good, but stuff like that in this book too, because I remember same feeling as a kid. Just I loved the movie E.T. I was also a little bit afraid of E.T., but also it was like that same kind of like heartwarming, the pain, the pain of when they have to say goodbye. So many good things.
Yeah. Well, Grady Hendrix is great at evoking the 80s.
Yeah.
And he has such a clean writing style. He doesn't over-explain, over-describe, but he gets across everything that he needs to.
And it's so emotional. And I think what Grady does really well is the ending, just bringing everything to this crescendo where you're just breathless at the end. You're just like, wow. He also does, the same is true in We Sold Our Souls, which I won't spoil, but that one, oh man, it's amazing. It's just this burst at the end where you're just like, what just like, even if you're just enjoying the story and it's really good and you want to know what happens, then you get to this end and it really just feels like a musical crescendo, like in a musical piece or something, because all these emotional pieces come together and you're just like, oh, this is so amazing and emotional. I think I cried with my best friend's Exorcism, and I don't usually cry reading books. It's one of the few books that's made me. Yeah, it's one of the few that's made me do that, and it's just this something about how it, I don't know, reminds me of that time, or I think many of us had that best friend. I had that. I'll speak for myself. I had that best friend that was like, you're over at each other's house too much, and you're too enmeshed, and then it gets into this weird high school stage where you're trying to be your own person, but then you also like care about everything they think, and then you do kind of drift apart, but then sort of talk in later years, and it's just, I feel like he captured that so well in this book.
I just last month read The Final Girl Support Group, and that has, aside from all the amazing slasher movie Easter eggs, that also has the sort of same ambiguity in it until it builds up to that ending. I don't know if this is the right way to put it, because the stories are so different, but the structure maybe is similar in that things build and again, they're just everything you read up to a point could go either way. It could be this simple explanation, or it could be this crazy out there thing. Although that one's in first person, so which kind of changes how the story can be interpreted.
Right. Because you're going through, it's not as objective, I guess, right?
Right. Well, you're only learning what the character is learning.
Right.
Whereas generally when it's third person, the reader will have more information.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say about the Grady Hendrix novel with the wonderful cover?
It's such a good cover. No, I think that covers it. It's just such a good book. And it just makes me feel it makes me feel all the things, it's like it's got the horror, it's got the heart, it's got the it's clever, it's got the nostalgia, it's got the all of that stuff. So, but it's also, I think, saying something at its core too. So I like that. I like when it's a mix of all those things. It's entertaining, but it's also got a depth to it, but it's also just so many Easter eggs, and I feel like Grady does that with a lot of his books. But I just love it, and so I recommend it to anybody. Yep.
And owls.
Definitely, yes, owls.
Scary birds and owls.
Roller rings. Oh, look, there's a roller skating right on the cover, and we still forgot about it. But I think it kind of tied. I think it all tied back together well. But yeah.
All right, great. Highly recommend that folks read this book if they haven't already, and if we didn't spoil too much. Although, again, we didn't remember a lot of stuff, so people are going to want to go and read and see what we couldn't remember.
Yep.
All right, so just couple more things before we wrap this up. What can you tell me about Ladies of the Fright?
So, Ladies of the Fright is my podcast, basically. Well, it's a joint project with my creative partner, Mackenzie Kiera, and we started it in February of 2018. And it was basically just, we were just like, we just want to have a collaborative project. We just want to talk about the horror books we like to read. She lives in California. I live in New Jersey. So it was also a way to, stay connected across the airwaves. And it quickly went from us talking about books we love to also interviewing authors and editors and librarians and books that, we've had Sadie Hartman on a couple times. So yeah, it just became something else. It became its own thing, and we talk about books, we talk about writing, we talk about horror, and it's a lot of fun. So.
Now, I haven't looked through all the episodes. Do you have one on My Best Friend's Exorcism?
We did. It was one of the first ones we did. It was, I think it might have even been like our second or third episode. And that was when we were still primarily just doing like we would pick a book and talk about it. And now we still do that, but it kind of went into being more interview based for a while. And then we realized, like, we love talking to all these people, but we miss talking about books. So now we have an author on, but we do something like what you've done, where we ask them to pick like a short story or a movie or a book they want to talk about. And so we'll do an interview coupled with a book conversation, because we're like, we miss talking about books. Like, that was the whole
So
reason we
what I'm
started
hearing
this.
is you're accusing me of stealing your idea.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, we probably stole your idea. You were probably doing it before us. But
I just started a month ago.
oh, well, I don't.
Yeah.
That's the wonderful thing about all of this is like that, and that is something an attitude we've adopted with our podcast, with other podcasts is like you're gonna come to our podcast for us, but also I see every other horror podcast as almost like a network. Like the more people who are listening to horror podcasts, whether it's ours or someone else's, that's better for all of us because that means like more people are learning about more books and more people are, we only do 2 episodes a month when we're not like swamped with life, and sometimes it's less than that. So if there's another podcast they can go listen to the other week or, every day, that keeps them coming back. So it's I kind of see it as like this big collaborative thing of like, we're all kind of helping each other make horror awesome.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
And then let's pimp this.
Yeah. This is my novel.
From Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, one of my favorite publishers.
They're so awesome there.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, if you weren't already on my radar because of Hell's Bells and everything, I pretty much pre-order anything that Perpetual Motion Machine puts up. So I would have been getting this book anyway. It was just sort of a double whammy because I'm like, a new PMMP book. Oh, and it's Lisa Quigley. Great. So tell folks about this, please, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. This is gosh, I need a better elevator pitch. But basically, I wrote this book when I just moved to New Jersey from California after living in California for like 12 years. My son was 8 weeks old, and I felt I was a new mom. I was in a new town, so I didn't really like have all the access to all my friends. And I had postpartum anxiety and all this stuff, and I would walk in the woods every day because there's a little trail by where my in-laws lived. And I got this idea one day. And so to me, it was a way for me to kind of process my postpartum anxiety and write about that. But this is not a good elevator pitch. It's a lot longer than an elevator pitch. But through the lens of imagining that there was this town, it's folk horror. So in this, there's this isolated town that is very idyllic. Nothing bad ever happens there. And it's supernatural to the point where like you can't even like break a bone or nothing outside of your regular time to die in old age after a good long life can happen to you. Like you can't die unnaturally, you can't get into a wreck, nothing. You can't get sick and die. And the main character, her family has been stewards of this town for generations, and she's getting ready to take over as town steward with her husband. And as she's about ready to take over, she learns that there is a very sinister price the town pays in order to maintain this safety. Yeah. And she decides she's not willing to pay that price, and so she has to escape with her baby into the forest.
All right.
With her whole family and town chasing her.
Of course. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it myself, as well as eventually, as I work my way through the list of Rewind or Die books, getting to Camp Neverland. I can't believe I forgot to point out, I wore this shirt especially for this one.
That's awesome.
Let's Summon Demons shirt, which is normally just a work shirt, but I thought it would be appropriate. I actually have a blanket with this same thing on
I love all of their shirts. They're so awesome.
It's one of the softest blankets I've ever owned. But
I love it.
okay, so let's see. I think we covered everything. Anything else at all that you want to say to people? Where can people find you online?
Yeah, if you're interested in the podcast, you can go to ladiesofthefright.com. We do post the episodes there, but you can also find us in all the podcast streaming places. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you should be able to find us. And then if you are interested in more about me, my website is lisaquigley.net. That has all my information. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, all the place, all those places.
All the places.
Yeah.
Excuse me. All right. Well, I think that's it. I think we covered everything.
I think so. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was awesome. I always am happy for a chance to talk about this book and encourage other people to read it, even though I'm sure most people have by now, but there's got to be someone else that still needs to hear about it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. If you just hold on a minute while I do my outro, and then hang out for a second after we stop recording. But there you have it. Thank you to Lisa Quigley. Folks out there, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. You know all the things you're supposed to do on YouTube. And that's all we have for you. So until next time, read more books.